movements of the Spirit can be really subtle and really humble. And in our society, our culture, which teaches us to be outward focused, to be very busy, it's easy to ignore what the Spirit is saying or how it's moving in us, how it's acting in us. And one of the best gifts we can give each other is to help each other pay attention to the movements of the Spirit, to help each other discover how the Spirit is interacting with us, how God is teaching us, how to see God and Spirit active in the world around us. It's simple and it's deeply profound. It's something that all human beings need to be who they fully are, to be authentic, to be alive in the Spirit. And it's amazing how we can help each other with that. A faithfulness group is a group of generally 4 to 6 people who are all interested in deepening in their spiritual lives, listening to the call of the Spirit, and discerning what the Spirit is asking of them or leading them to do step by step in the small things in their lives and sometimes in a bigger leading. So these 4 to 6 friends will meet usually once a month for only 2 hours. And in those 2 hours, 2 members of the group will have the focus of the group for about an hour. And the next time they meet, 2 different members will have the focus of the group, and then so forth. So that if you're in a group of 4 and you meet once a month, you get to be the focus of the group for an hour every other month. And if you're in a group of 6, you get to be the focus of the group every 3rd month. So it's designed that way with a very specific format so that busy people can fit a 2-hour opportunity once a month into their busy schedules.
It's an astonishingly rare opportunity for friends to relate to one another on a deeper spiritual level.
In a culture that's really numb, it is so hard to find authentic, loving connection, even when that's what you are actively seeking and trying to cultivate in your life. And so there is such a beauty in so easily coming together and going to that place of authenticity and love.
Friends often help each other with clearness in what's called a clearness committee, which can be an amazing and wonderful opportunity for an individual to have the focus of the group to help them discern the next step. It's a beautiful thing, but it takes a fair amount of time, and most people can't have a clearness committee too often. But a faithfulness group is like an ongoing clearness committee. You don't get as much time and attention, but it meets again and again and again, and it's an accompaniment over time. And it's not only about clearness, it's about faithfulness. So once you hear the call, what's next? How do you respond? How do you take the first step? How do you take the next step? What happens when something arises in your attempts to be faithfulness that you didn't expect? How do you discern how the Spirit's working there? So a faithfulness group provides long-term accompaniment.
I've also used a pure clearness committee model before, and I like that a lot. I think clearness committees are a tradition that I want to see, continue, and that clearness committees to me feel a little bit more about what a decision and a particular outcome that you're trying to decide around and discern around. And the faithfulness model is about what does the process look like. And so often I think the way forward is that we don't know the answer for a long time, and so the question is more about how do we do this well now, and how do we do a process that's faithful and loving and compassionate and kind to ourselves and others and in connection with God. And so through the faithfulness groups, I do feel like I got a chance each time that I was the focus person to hear what the next step around my faithfulness was on any particular question I was bringing.
The basic format is that the person who is the presenter for their hour, they'll begin by presenting for 15 minutes, and they'll talk about how the Spirit is at work. Usually they spend some time in preparation beforehand. They pray about it or bring it into the light and see how they're being led, what to bring to the group. And so they present about that for 15 minutes, how the Spirit's at work, what events in their life are related to that have happened. The group takes that in. Sometimes there's an occasional brief, factual question of clarification, but usually you take it in and then you settle for a period of time, and then deeper questions will come. We practice a faithfulness group with the assumption that each person has an inner guide, and that deep within themselves, each person knows how the Spirit is guiding them. On some level, maybe not consciously. And our questions are designed to help each person look more deeply at how the Spirit's at work. It may be in savoring or paying more attention to a moment that they've had, or sometimes a question will come that helps a person look at something they haven't looked at before. So faithfulness groups involve a discipline of learning how to ask the question that helps the focused person look into their own experience. In our culture, we usually respond to people by giving our own opinions or advice or analyzing a situation. And in the practice of the faithfulness group, we learn to let go of those everyday responses, those habitual responses, and to be with people in a deeper way with the assumption that they already know. And so the questions we ask are not questions to satisfy our own curiosity. They're questions to help the person look more deeply into their own experience of the Spirit, or to pay more attention to what is sometimes really subtle indications or nudges from the Spirit.
The intimacy that we've been able to find, it comes in part because there is a sort of bedrock assumption that we love one another and trust one another, and that we're engaged in an effort to help each of us achieve a greater understanding and serenity and connection with the Spirit.
As Quakers, our practice is listening. That if we believe that God is always speaking to us in every moment, and that we can hear that voice within us, or spoken in vocal ministry from others, or read in a text that someone has written, then we must listen as carefully as we can, and as openly as we can, to move all of the clutter of the rest of the world out of the way, so that we can hear what is the still small voice.
Being the focus of a faithfulness group for an hour is a really special thing. I feel so lucky that I have had so much opportunity to do that in my life, having been part of various peer groups and faithfulness groups of this sort for 20 years now. It's one of the deepest forms of spiritual intimacy that I've ever experienced. A group that I've gotten to know over time, who love me, who care about me, who are asking loving, probing, gentle questions, allowing me to express things that I have kept held within my heart, and in a safe way, just allowing me more and more to become more authentically who I am. And loving that and encouraging that, celebrating that, the happy parts of that, the sad and difficult parts of that, all of it is welcomed. And it really has helped me become a more whole person.
So the way that it works is you're a focused person once out of every, 2 or 3 sessions, perhaps. And to get to be with somebody else and helping them find their inward guide, and that you're listening for your inward guide to support them in their search and journey is also, I found, brought me closer to that presence that I want to be closer to all the time.
You feel supported, and you feel more accountable and responsible to it.
It has been astonishing to me how people have spoken so precisely to my condition.
LVM, one of the elders for this course, said to another participant in our first residency, that sometimes it's hard to remember that God's there because it's so close. It's so close it's hard to see. And that's been my experience in the faithfulness group, is having others reflecting that mirror back to me helps me get in touch with just how close the Spirit is, like right on my shoulder or wrapped around me.
You're able to be open in a way and vulnerable in a way that can be harder with a larger group.
Being in a faithfulness group has been a gift to me, and I think all the members of my faithfulness group have experienced this. It's answered a hunger that we've had to come closer to each other in a spiritual way, and to encourage each other along a path that we often, I think, can feel alone on.
We were all coming to this seeking to be more open to the voice of God, but we all came from where we were at. We could only start in that place. And that meant that everyone was coming in a different way and had different needs. Everyone was changed by listening to each other and by being heard by each other. That if we hold each other tenderly, if we love each other with the love of God, then those people's voices will come out. And they will speak to us with the voice of God. And it is beautiful.
We can know virtually nothing about somebody's, the facts of their lives, the CV that they carry with them. But we know their hearts and souls in a way that is often deeper than the people that we've known all our lives.
In my home meeting, the way that I set up my faithfulness group was to approach people one by one, and people who seemed like they might be interested, and ask if they wanted to be in a group. And I think some people did a more general announcement to the whole meeting, and perhaps their meeting set up more than one faithfulness group, but I was just looking for a couple folks who were going to do that with me. And that I also had some friends who are not at my meeting, one of whom is a Unitarian Universalist minister, and one of whom goes to a different friends meeting. It was just really lovely to have people at my meeting who I felt like was forming a deeper connection with. So when I saw them at worship, I had this little tug on my heart that it was newer, right? Like some of them I knew before, but to feel like, oh, I actually know you better than I used to, and I'm glad for that.
Well, my first approach to starting a faithfulness group in my meeting was to go through the directory, and it didn't feel quite right to do it that way. So I spoke with somebody who said, no, you just need to sit and just open yourself up and just let it come to you. Who would be good to have in this faithfulness group? And some names came to mind, which in hindsight seemed pretty obvious. And then some others which I hadn't thought of. And then I just got on the phone and gave them a call and sent an email with the documentation. And at first we had a huge response. We thought we were going to have 2 groups. So we did an introductory session where we just talked about the process and how it was going to work. And everybody was interested. Some people, but it became clear that some people were interested because they wanted to support me. So then we had to become clear that the purpose of this is not to support me in my work with forming faithfulness groups, it's for them. And when that was stated, it became more clear who it was a really good fit for.
I was very surprised to see how much energy there was around that. It revealed to me that my local meeting had a deep hunger for more faithfulness. That these people that I could feel a spiritual depth in, but did not always feel that same reaching, responded so readily to this opportunity that we ended up with 4 different groups with about 20 people participating, and that's the great majority of the people who show up to our meeting every Sunday.
I wasn't able to set one up in my local area. I tried unsuccessfully, but I started thinking about, well, what would be a format when I think about my spiritual peers, all across the country who I know from things like Friends General Conference, who are all really spread out from one another, have deep spiritual lives, but not a place to connect to, not a monthly meeting, and are in a transient point in life. So if they connect to a monthly meeting, they're gone again and 3 months later. And so I began trying to think about what could it look like to put one together using technology, like via Zoom, which is the platform that this group met through. And I would really strongly prefer to be in person, and technology is not usually something I'm very capable at or feel very excited about most of the time. But I began thinking about what would that look like, and so I've started pursuing what could that look like with a friend who's in another state.
If I want friends in the larger society and in my monthly meeting to be more faithful, it is incumbent on me to be more faithful as well.
It's opened up a spiritual place that I've been looking for a long time. All of us approaching worship with our larger community, our Sunday 11 o'clock, with an eagerness and a sense of connectedness and a kind of wonder that we didn't have before.
For the past 20 years, I've sort of put my spiritual life on hold. It's like when the kids grow up or when work is less busy, I'll attend to my spiritual life. And I know God will be there. I know God will be there when I'm ready. But it's not like flicking a switch. In the meantime, I've built up so many habits and responses and just ways of doing things that are contrary to being open to the Spirit, that take quite a lot of practice and effort to unlearn and to peel away. If you're hungry for spiritual growth, this is manna. This will feed you.
I think the faithfulness groups as a model of sharing deeply, building community is just a really tangible way to be doing what we say we want to be doing, which is deepening worship, deepening faithfulness, understanding our own faith better, and supporting others in those journeys.
Being in a faithfulness group with members of my meeting is a very special privilege. I'm getting to know some people very intimately, people who I've known for many years and care about and like. I'm now in this deeper relationship with them and they with me, where we're really trying to draw out the gifts and the promptings of the Spirit in one another. And it's such a beautiful process to be a part of, and something I didn't know I was missing until I had it.
Being in a faithfulness group with members of my meeting has had 2 consequences that I can think of. One is that our relationships with one another were strengthened. And it also, and this is kind of a subcategory of that, is that I had often thought of a meeting kind of as a big wheel, and sometimes I wouldn't really like the way it was turning or the shape of it, or I thought it should be rounder or something. But then after the faithfulness group, I saw how a meeting is really, there's a lot of little wheels in there that can really help the big wheel. And you don't, if you have a problem with the state of, the spiritual state of your meeting, you don't really have to concern yourself with that as much. You really need to work on your own spirituality, and that can help the meeting in ways that you are likely not aware of. But this faithfulness group integrates you with people in a much smaller circle in a way that it focuses the concern and strengthens your relationship with them, and also it will strengthen your relationship with God, and create a safe space to talk about these things that are not easy to talk about even in a larger spiritual body, and might not even be appropriate to talk about in a larger spiritual body. I think of the phrase in the Bible, when 2 or 3 together are gathered in my name. There is a function for large spiritual bodies, but specific attention is given to smaller ones.
I gave ministry for the first time in my meeting as a result of this program. That I had learned to trust my waiting. I'd learned to trust my listening, and that I would find it when it was time.
I've had a glimpse of a self I can live into that's more connected with the divine and more connected with my fellow Quakers. And I've felt that I've been brought closer to my home meeting community and to the larger New England and East Coast community of Quakers.
I think Quakers have a really important message in this time, if we can remember it. And programs like this are a place for that remembering on a deep, spiritual, cellular level. For remembering and a knowing of the light and of the light in all things, and that we need to testify to that through our lives.
For a long time, I've had a strong and a clear sense that God is calling the Religious Society friends to a really important task in terms of helping humanity to make a necessary shift in terms of consciousness and culture. The Quakers have a really important role to play, and that we can only play that role if we are deeply spiritually grounded ourselves and as meetings. Then we'll have something to offer that the world desperately needs as humanity faces a future that we have never experienced before on this planet. It's going to be new, it's going to be hard, but we have a guide. We have an inner spiritual guide that can help us to navigate all the difficulties and challenges and opportunities that are coming in the future. And we can learn how to help each other hear that guide and to work with it. And miraculous things are possible when we listen to the Spirit and allow the energies of the Spirit to come through us as individuals, and especially as groups and communities, spiritual communities.